Are you wondering how to break the stigma around mental health issues and the impact that it's having on our African American and other disenfranchised communities? If you are, join us, your hosts, Merencia Henson, Cresheia Lee, and Walanda Johnson on our Mindful Moments mental health radio show every second and fourth Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, as we dive into a mindful dialogue to empower, inform, and bring awareness to the positive impact of mental health wellness. Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining our radio show as we dive in, we discuss a very hot, juicy, fun topic around sexuality and intimacy. To start it off, my name is Merencia Henson. I am one of the co-hosts. I am an associate clinical social worker here in San Diego. I work with children, adolescents, as well as adults that have intellectual disabilities, as well as severe and persistent mental health disorders.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cresheia Lee. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work at one of the detention facilities as a mental health clinician where I assess inmates for suicide ideation.
And I am Walanda Johnson. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I practice privately, providing support to adults through teletherapy regarding issues in relation to anxiety, depression, regular life stressors.
And we are joined today by Mary Cipriani-Price. Very excited to have her with us. And for starters, I'm going to go ahead and read her bio, and then she'll share a little bit about herself, and then we'll jump right into it. So Mary is a licensed marriage and family therapist, adjunct professor in MFT at Azusa Pacific University since 2009, AAMFT approved supervisor, and the director and owner of San Diego Institute for Couples and Families, as well as a clinical supervisor at Alliant Couple and Family Clinic. Mary's personal mission is to change the divorce statistics and help couples create a deeper and more meaningful connection, as well as helping individuals and families live to their greatest potential. She is also passionate about training and mentoring future MFTs. Mary has completed an advanced training certificate, doctoral level in marriage and family sex therapy at the University of Pennsylvania, along with extensive and advanced training in EFT, EMDR, premarital inventories, and certified sex therapy, and Gottman method. Mary loves to work with couples, individuals, and families, and continues to, I'm running out of space. Sorry, you guys. And continues to work with couples, individuals, and families in her training in couples therapy from Susan Johnson and John Gottman. She also treats depression, trauma, anxiety, sexual dysfunction, sex addiction, along with their betrayal of partners. Mary follows Jesus of Nazareth, loves her 2 kids, church friends, the beach, the mountains, and living in San Diego, but traveling the world. Welcome, Mary Cipriani-Price.
Thank you so much, Lucretia. It's so good to be here. Lucretia was one of my students at Bethel, and one of the brilliant students, and excelled, and I just loved having her in class, and it's just so good to connect with her, Lucretia, and everybody on this radio program. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, we're so excited for this evening.
In my master's level studies, there are many classes, of course, as I took that I enjoyed, but this one was just intriguing to me. The ideal of sexuality and intimacy, working with Christians. Of course, we're Christians like everybody else when it comes to sexuality and intimacy, but the ideal of merging those things together was kind of mind-opening in a very positive way. And so I thought this would be a great topic to go ahead and to explore. So how about we just jump right into it? What exactly is sexuality and intimacy from a Christian perspective, Mary? Like when a person calls, what do they normally say when they call?
Well, usually when they call, they're calling about their relationship, and there's somewhat of a disconnection, and they are probably polarized. So a lot of relationship issues I wanted there to be one place in San Diego where, because marriage therapy and couples therapy are the one therapies that were failing the most, because most therapists had never even taken a course in working with a couple. So I really felt like there needed to be a place, because there were a group of us that were spending thousands of hours and dollars in advanced training, which is what you have to do if you want to be a good couples therapist, or if you want to be a good child play therapist. You've got to go on and do advanced studies. So it's a lot about the relationship, and a lot of times they come in about their relationship, and then I hear in their relationship that they're also struggling sexually, and maybe she hasn't ever had an orgasm, or they might not have ever consummated their marriage. That comes in a lot, or there was a painful experience on the honeymoon, and now it's just very painful, and they're polarizing and disconnecting. So
Wow.
that's pretty much the disconnection is pretty much the leading factor.
Okay. Okay. And so maybe you can share a little bit more, like, what can people expect? So they call, they come in, and ladies, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah. What can a couple expect when they come in for therapy? So they can expect someone that's highly trained, where we are constantly in advanced training, where so many people have been showing up with sex addiction, and we've been seeing a lot of partner betrayal and affairs and whatnot. So we've done advanced training in that, and are working towards certification in that. So someone that's highly trained, we've spent thousands of hours and dollars in advanced training, and we want to come alongside and support the person under what they're going through, their thoughts, their feelings. We just want to support them, come alongside of them, because we care deeply about our clients and the pain that they carry with them. And our goal is just to help them resolve that and get out of it as quickly as possible. So now, in years past, couples would go to therapy and stay in there for years on end, and possibly never get better. But, there are some really good there's an evidence-based approach now where, 12 to 20 sessions, and you can really turn the marriage around and turn the relationship around and get them going on a much better trajectory.
Now, with your experience, Mary, what is, the deep rooted issue that you've seen I guess, like, similarities when it comes to why they are addicted to sex? Like, has it been because, of an abuse? Is it because of just any type of addiction, right? It has to stream or stem from somewhere. So within your own experience, what have you seen or heard when it comes to, like, the reason why people get addicted to sex?
Well, I see a lot of people where one of the inventories we give our clients is, who did you turn to when you were little? When you were scared, who could you go to? When you were worried that boys wouldn't like you or girls wouldn't like you, who could you go to? And if they couldn't go to anybody, then they had to figure it out themselves, right? So around that age, that's middle school years, they're really discovering their body, and children need to be soothed. And so if they're not being soothed by their parents, and there isn't a good attachment with their parents, then what do they do? They soothe themselves in other ways. Sometimes there are people that soothe themselves sexually, and then it starts there, and then it just progresses. But what it's really about is, it's an intimacy problem, right?
Okay.
Instead of, as adults, instead of turning to someone and being vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm in pain. Hey, I'm lonely. Can you help me? What they might do is just withdraw with those feelings, and then go and soothe themselves. And that's the tragedy of pornography, is not that it's just a sin, that it is, when you open your eyes, there's no one there loving you back. And we are not wired not to be loved, right? God created us to be in relationship with him and be in relationship with others. So when we don't feel like someone has our back, we're at 500% higher risk of immune disease deficiencies, heart attacks, strokes, depression, anxiety. We won't live as long. We won't make as much money. So it is bad for our health to not be connected and to be able to be vulnerable to someone else. So it really is an intimacy problem. Instead of turning to a person and being vulnerable, they withdraw and turn to a pseudo form of intimacy.
Right.
That was such a powerful statement. I had to write it down about when you open your eyes and no one is loving you back. Like, wow, that was so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we're wired biologically, we get sick if that happens. And God wired us, God knew what he was doing, right? So that's the tragedy. It's not people think of it as a sin, but it's a tragedy. That person is alone and disconnected.
And like you said too, is like that loneliness, and then if you are a believer, and let's just say you are, on Pornhub or any other porn site, and then when you're done, what happens? You feel guilty, you feel ashamed, you may feel embarrassed, even if you're by yourself, and then you have to ask God for forgiveness, and it's like a whirlwind over and over and over again because of just like that spiritual connection. And like you said, at the end of the day, it's like we all want to have a companion. We all want to be loved. And that's why I asked that question, is like, that because it's so much deeper, right, than just the act of sex and why people are addicted to it.
Yeah.
And it's not, and like we're all therapists, so we know like not until somebody reaches that point of understanding where it comes from, like you said, it could be 10 years, 12 years, and you're still trying to battle with this addiction because you're not really into the deep-rooted issue of what's really going on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and it's too scary for that person to get vulnerable. So they keep going to that pseudo form, and they're just stuck there, and then it just progresses and progresses and progresses.
Yeah.
You said it's a tragedy. Wow.
Absolutely. Like you, Walanda, I thought that the statements that she made was pretty powerful too. It's just so much bigger than just a physical act of sex. Yes, that's one part, and it's important. God created us to have that experience, but it's so much more than that. We need the human connection.
Yes.
We need that connection. I know we had a pre-meeting and Mary had mentioned about how the body works, and maybe you can share a little bit about that, as well as what happens during orgasm, like the exchange.
Yeah, well, wild things happen to your body when you have sex.
Right.
Wild. It is wild. So
that's why you keep wanting it.
while most of us are sure that we like to have sex, most of us also haven't spent much time thinking about what happens physiologically when we're engaged in the act, right? So basically, when we're turned on or having sex, our body and brain are lighting up like a pinball machine and going through a multitude of physiological changes to make sex as enjoyable as possible. And so this is called a process. This is called the sexual response cycle, which means that the sequence of events that happen to the body when a person becomes sexually aroused, and then when a person participates in sexually stimulating activities like having intercourse, self-love, masturbation, foreplay, that this is the response cycle that happens. And it's divided into 4 phases. It's there has to be desire, like I desire to want to do this. And some people don't have desire, like as they're raising kids or they're stressed out from work. And so they wait for the desire, but then if the desire never comes, then we'll see some couples that maybe haven't had sex for months on end or years on end even.
Can I just ask a question about that? Because I think that's really important, because I think a lot of us develop our ideals of what sex and desire is supposed to be about, are like, as we're young, but that's before we have kids. That's before we, have multiple jobs and bills and responsibilities and all those things. And is not necessarily realistic when you're married and you have children and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And like Mary said, you're waiting for the desire to come, but you're exhausted. You know, by the time you begin to wind down, it's 10 or 11 o'clock and you're trying to get some sleep. And it can be months, I mean, years before
Yeah.
people even have, you know, sex. But I just wanted to throw that out because a lot of people don't really think about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what I tell my clients is desire can be kindled. Try to kindle it. If it kindles, great. If it doesn't, I had one client years ago where in the middle of the night, he just started stroking her and touching her. And the last thing she wanted to do was get up in the middle of the night. She had a big business meeting, but yet they ended up, the desire kindled, and it was worth her losing the sleep that night.
Okay.
And so it can be kindled. And then if it kindles, great. If it doesn't, then you've just had some special time.
Right.
So that's the first phase.
Hmm.
Second phase is arousal. You know, when you actually get aroused, then the orgasm, and then resolution. So it's the same for men and women, except men also will have a refractory period. The same process is happening in men. It's happening all over the body. The body is engorging with blood, vascongestion, it's called. And then it's all over the body for both men and women. And then, there is no distinct beginning or end to each of those phases. They're all actually part of a continuous process. And by the way, we also go through them at nighttime when we sleep. So, which is, some people have orgasms. Women will have orgasms in the middle of the night as they're sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't even touched themselves. And it's because their body has gone through the sexual response cycle
Okay.
on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's pretty neat that it goes
Right.
on, you know, it can do it by itself. But when we're having
Super
sex,
women.
what?
I was just cheering about being a woman. I just was, happy about it.
We are super women. And one thing that is thought about right now, talking about super women and superpowers, is like women that can have like back-to-back orgasms. And I know, like, I think that is a superpower, because like with men, after they ejaculate, like that's that, like they have to get aroused again, they have to get hard again, like everything that comes after that. But with the woman, you may have a woman that can like have orgasms back to back. And
Some women.
Some, yes, some.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen, Mary, like difficulties with women where there's like getting an orgasm because that she's not familiar with her body? So like I took a vagina monologue class in undergrad, and I was amazed learning of like the high percentage of women that's never touched themselves, never seen their vagina before. And, I can think that it would definitely affect their sex life with their boyfriend or with their, with their spouse.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And women get to know their bodies so much later. They're not, they're not touching it. So getting to know our bodies is very important. And even when having sex, like we are unwittingly reaping the benefits of the sexual response cycle, but we're probably not thinking things like, wow, thank you, increased blood flow, for enabling more blood to rush to my penis or vagina, right? Resulting in mind-blowing sensations. So that kind of process is part of what happens during sex that makes it feel really good. And just knowing our bodies, 70% of women need additional stimulation. They cannot have an orgasm during intercourse. And of the 30% left, 15% can, and then the other 15% don't have orgasms at all.
Wow.
So what I recommend to my clients is to help her have an orgasm before intercourse, because usually it's the other way around. They have intercourse and then try to help her. But if she has an orgasm before intercourse, then her body's gone through the sexual response cycle. It could heighten the probabilities of having an orgasm during intercourse as well.
Okay.
So
put this down as a tip in our chat.
Mary, can you continue with the other phases? I know you stopped up on arousal phase.
Yeah, well, just yeah, there's no distinct beginning or end to them, just arousal. I mean, desire, we get aroused. We have the orgasm. Orgasm is nothing more than the release of the blood flow into the genital area. By the way, the first 6 weeks, the fetus is female. And if the Y chromosome is there, the clitoris becomes the head of the penis. And
I remember that.
so, yeah, so there are similarities and sensitivities. And then you've got the man's most sensitive part of his penis and the woman's least sensitive part, which is the upper vaginal canal by the cervical opening.
Right.
Right. So there are very few nerve endings there, so that when we give birth, we don't die from the pain, even though we do.
Right.
But yeah, same process, like engorgement of blood, both male and female, and then the release of the blood.
Which is so important how you're breaking it down about knowing our bodies. I mean, I think it would benefit couples, if they haven't already done it, to get a book that talks about the physiology, you know, the whole breakdown of the body and the different points and the touch and all that kind of thing. Because if the partner, the male partner, is trying to stimulate the wrong area, or an area that's not very sensitive, are prone to increasing the orgasm, then it's all for naught. So it doesn't mean that the person's not putting in work. It doesn't mean that the female is not wanting to receive. They're just not being stimulated in a way that would, you know, increase orgasm.
Yeah, and I love when clients want to find out how their body works and then help their spouse know how their body works, right? So there's this thing called the spoon position, where she can sit against him, and then she can touch herself, but then he puts his hand on top of her hand. So he knows where to go and how to go. Otherwise it's hit or miss, right? Or she puts her hand on top of his hand and guides his hand.
Right.
So yeah, that's important.
What was the name of the position again?
The spoon position, yeah. He sits against the bed and she can sit against him. That way, for someone that hasn't been able to have an orgasm, doesn't know how, she doesn't have to be fearful that he's watching her, or that he's back here, she's here. She can be vulnerable, and then, you know, so that's maybe like a step one, and then step two, he might come alongside of her. You know, the more she feels comfortable, the more vulnerable she can get, the more positioned. The safer a couple feels with each other, the more they can explore and experiment. The more connected they are as a couple, the safer they feel, the more they will experiment.
Right.
No, that totally makes sense, because, you know, one, if you're stressed out because your partner isn't understanding your body, right, and how you want to be touched and the position that you want, you're not going to be relaxed physically, mentally, or emotionally for you to even have an orgasm, or for you to even enjoy the act of sex. So I definitely like that. If I ever get, you know, a client that's having these type of concerns, that's good to put in my toolbox to share. I like what you said of like having him sit behind her, because like you said, she's not feeling embarrassed. She's not feeling anxious. You know, she may not be, if she's looking at him and he makes a face, right, then she may feel scared and, you know, may refuse. So I like that tip. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
At what point, if at all, Mary, when a couple comes to see you, if they try different things and it's still not working for them, that you might suggest that they actually go get a physical?
Actually,
that's a good question.
Yeah, actually all the time, because we don't want to work on a physiological problem from a psychological perspective. So I want to make sure everything's working the way it should be working. The hormones are right.
Okay.
Yeah, because for example, if somebody has pain with sex, they could actually have a rigid hymen that where she might need a hymenectomy because it's too rigid. So it's not pain because she's got psychological problems. It's a real physiological problem, or maybe hormonally she's off balance. So there are lots of things that, so yeah, we just generally want our clients to be able to have had a physical and talk to a medical doctor first.
Awesome.
Do we have a space for some questions? Can I jump in a couple of questions, Mary?
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay. So one of our viewers asked about, actually, I feel like one of our viewers asked about the idea of having sex to relieve stress. I guess I assume to further that question, it's like, is that an actual thing? Is it helpful? What's the
Yes.
idea behind that?
Yeah. But again, couples that are connected, couples that have a secure connection and they feel safe with each other and they feel like they've got each other has their back, can have sex to make love to each other, and they can have sex for a quickie as stress relief, or just a quickie.
Thank you for that answer, because it kind of leads to the next. It leads to the other question, which I think was, anyway. How does a couple? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Just one more thing. If you don't feel safe, then you're going to feel used when your partner wants stress relief or wants a quickie.
Right.
So then that's a bad place.
Right.
So how do you establish a safe relationship? I know this is a loaded question, but
I think it's open communication. Like because I know where that question came from. So for me personally, if I am stressed out, whether it's being a mommy or transitions in my life or so forth, and if one of the things that I enjoy in my toolbox is having sex with my partner, and I know that that's a way to relieve my stress, like Mary said, whether it's a quickie or putting down your child after he or she goes to bed, like you said, it's just about that communication. Like, look, we got an hour, we just put down so-and-so, our child, I need to relieve this stress. And if you are enjoying your partner, you're enjoying the act of sex, then me personally, I don't feel like that would be a negative thing. Would you agree, Mary?
Right. No, it wouldn't be a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the connection, but people who have a secure connection can be vulnerable with each other. They can turn to each other and say, hey, I'm lonely. Hey, I'm sad, versus be reactive. And that's what we do at San Diego Institute for Couples and Families, mainly, is we are helping couples who get polarized through their ruptures in their relationship. They polarize and then they emotionally disconnect, and that's when they get a divorce. That's what causes divorce mainly, is emotional disconnection. So we're teaching them how to turn to each other. And if they can turn to each other just 30% of the time, it's going to make an amazing difference. So we all have ruptures in our relationships, right? We all run into problems and things that hurt us, but how we repair them, and can we turn to each other and say, hey, I'm lonely, or hey, I'm sad, then where we're a safe place for each other, then that's golden.
So the safety is in the vulnerability with one another.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would think too, the safety and vulnerability, that is established before you even get to sex. I mean, that's established outside the bedroom, before the intimate. That's something that's ongoing. So,
in fact, that's what makes great sex is, people say, the Rock Church, can you come over and talk about, great sex, or, people that ask me to do that. I'm talking about emotional connection and why it's important, why we need to have someone that has our back. That's what makes great sex. And guess what? As we get older and as we live longer with our partners, it doesn't get boring if you've got that emotional connection. That's better and better the older you get.
I like that. About a couple of months ago, I took a course via Zoom with Dr. Klein, and he's has I guess expert in sex and intimacy, and the course was titled something to the effect about sex and sexuality through the ages as you age. And so I initially thought I was going to tune into a virtual course where they're talking about older people having sex and do they have sex and what have you. But really it was about what we're talking about right now. It's about, intimacy is so much bigger than the physical act. And he spent a lot of time just going back saying, like, our bodies and our circumstances are constantly changing. Just when you think you have it down, something else will change. Whether that's like something in your family, your finances, an illness, a disability, menopause, just whatever. And it's like it's an ongoing process of staying in tune with your body and your partner's body, and being vulnerable and being willing to adapt to those changes.
Yeah.
And that's throughout life. And so I thought it was a really, really good course. It was extremely informative. And like he said, just because you're getting older doesn't mean that sex stops. It doesn't mean that sex is not enjoyable or desired.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think another great topic to discuss, if I may, is how when people think about intimacy, I believe that like many just automatically think of sexual intimacy, but I really feel like within the 12, because so number one, there's 12 types of intimacy. And, like we were kind of talking about right now, just like building that connection and being vulnerable. I feel as though if you have strong connections in those different types of intimacy levels, it really builds your relationship on those different levels. What do you think, Mary?
Oh yeah, when people think of intimacy, they think of sexual, right? Sex, right? But there's emotional intimacy, there's intellectual, there's aesthetic, there's creative, there's recreational intimacy. I love recreational intimacy. I used to go for a run. We would go for a run and run a 10K, and then go to a Grand Slam breakfast, afterwards.
Cool.
So just doing things together, or even work intimacy or crisis intimacy. There's intimacy in having crisis and coping with problems and pain, and standing together against whatever the crisis is.
Sure.
You get intimate from struggling with differences together and fighting, because if you didn't care, you would walk away.
Right.
So if there's conflict, that's a good sign for us, because then we know that the two people care about each other, because they're hanging in there and they're facing and struggling with their differences together.
Yeah.
So there are a lot, and I gave you a handout, and it's by two I think pastors, Kleinbell and Kleinbell. Some of these definitions I think are a little bit they don't represent how I feel about, like, for example, the spiritual intimacy is a bit weak to me. So I encourage people to go through these intimacies and change them and write them the way they see them.
Okay.
And then from that place go and then maybe even add some more things to them. It doesn't have to be 12. Right. But these two people came up with 12, and then look and see, do both of them desire improvement? Does he, or are they both satisfied?
I like that.
One thing that when I was looking at one thing that I was just intrigued on, and just really just reflecting on my own relationship that I have with my partner, is number one is like the more that you love somebody like unconditionally, you really allow yourself to be open for new things. Like, for an example, the recreational intimacy. I know my partner, he loves working out. He loves hiking. Like, that's his way of like decompressing, and he really enjoys working out and doing outdoorsy things. Now with me, I do eat healthy. I'm going to start like working out more. And because I love him and I know the importance of the recreational for him to work out, I'm excited to have a physical trainer and start this new life with him in a place of intimacy that I know is like number one for him. So I think that when it comes to just the communication and the love that you have for that person, like, okay, it's maybe not my number one intimacy, but because it is for him, I'm going to embrace it and enjoy it with him. And then the other one is spirituality. Like when before him and I got together, we were best friends. We still are best friends. And we started off in our journey of really moving it to the next level on that spiritual intimacy level. Number one, like we fasted for 40 days, we prayed together, we still pray for each other. And so for us, the spiritual intimacy is number one. And I'm so glad that we have that foundation and we're equally yoked on that level.
Great. That's great.
Man, it's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have a couple more questions if, we have time.
Yes.
Someone asked, should couples, in light of talking about couples getting physicals, should they get physicals before they get married to kind of weed out any sexual possible dysfunctions or challenges or?
I mean, usually people are, going to their doctors, and I've not ever thought of that, but I mean, usually it does work, but if things do work, right? But if they don't, then I would go to a doctor and say, hey, what's going on? But I think most women have had an OBGYN appointment before, and they should know, what's happening there and what their experience is. And
right.
Maybe if the man is prematurely ejaculates, possibly that would be, an indication, hey, go get a physical and let's check this out, maybe.
Sure.
But yeah, I've not heard of that, but that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Right.
Okay.
Any more, Walanda?
There's quite a few.
Bring it. I'm excited.
I'm trying to find my wording. So the question is, why is sex centered around orgasm? Can it be fun without an objective?
Definitely. Yeah. It's a very soul connecting, it knits people together, it creates a soul tie, and it doesn't have to end in an orgasm, but the orgasm is an amazing thing, right? It's
euphoric. It's very euphoric.
Yeah. So I would want someone to at least experience it once before they say, hey, let's not do that. But if they decide not to do that, yeah, and it doesn't have to have, you don't have to have an orgasm and still feel loved and still feel connected and still feel pleasured.
I just think people need to be on the same page, because if you take a couple and if one person is dead set on like, you have to have an orgasm or I haven't done my job, you know what I mean? And then that can cause some conflict, right there. But if both people have already had a discussion and said, if I don't reach orgasm and I let you know that I am pleasured, I'm pleased, then that should be enough. I just think you just have to talk about it, just really be on the same page about it.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
The one thing that orgasms do is they emit oxytocin, and oxytocin knits you to the person.
We like oxytocin.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant when I said euphoric. I just said it in that pleasurable way, but that's literally what I was referring to.
Yeah, and there's a secular researcher, Helen Fisher, at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and she's been doing a lot of studies on love and says, hey, if you don't want to have children with the person you're having sex with, don't have sex with them, because if you have an orgasm, you're gonna have oxytocin and it's gonna knit you to the person. So, maybe that's not the best person for you to be with.
So some people are running around here knitted to like 10s and 20s people that they don't want to have children by.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I mean, think about
I know. I just was like, I don't know what to say to that. What's considered pre-ejaculation?
I'm sorry. But again, though, it goes back to the communication. If you're like, look, I'm not trying to have children, it's not in my cards, at least have that communication, whether you're a male or a female, because if there is some type of love or, again, that soul tie and there's issues, you can go back to like, look, but we did communicate I did say I didn't want any children. So it just really goes back to that open communication before you even have sex about that.
Yeah.
I think there was some clarification, Mary, about what is premature ejaculation.
Premature ejaculation is where a man ejaculates before he wants to. So maybe he thrusts for a couple of seconds and then ejaculates. Or maybe when he gets close to the vaginal canal, he ejaculates and can't penetrate the vaginal canal. So it's before it's premature. It's called premature because it's before he wants to.
Okay.
And again, I think this is a reason why it's important to, talk about all levels of intimacy before you get married, before you step into that role and you have sex after marriage, because too many times when it comes to soul ties and now you're connected to that person spiritually with your mind, body, and soul, and then it's harder for you to detach from that person. And sometimes it'll even deter you from getting the man or the woman that God had in store for you because of those past partners and having that soul tie. So even as a Christian, it's real. But, when you really do some deep healing and you do some deep inner soul searching and, and you allow yourself to be relieved from those soul ties, you really get to take that mud off of your eyes and really see that the person that God really had you, it allows you to see the person that God has for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And when somebody comes into our lives, we connect with them on a spiritual and a chemical level, right? The chemical level is the oxytocin or the hormones and wanting to be with a person. The spiritual level, however, that takes shape. So, and then that's, when we develop a connection or a soul tie with them. And then the soul ties strengthen our spiritual interactions with that person and allow for a closer, deeper relationship. So if you're having sex with someone that you don't really know and you're having orgasms, you're getting knitted to a person that's not possibly the best for you.
Yeah.
And I really wish that these conversations and, ladies, this is the reason why we wanted to have this discussion, because the three of us, and I would assume you as well, Mary, would agree that these are the type of conversations that we need to have in church, right? Like we need to be vulnerable and we need to be honest and real with the youth. Of course, we're going to have boundaries depending on their age, but, it's more than just, the pastor or maybe even like the older churchmen, like, well, no, don't have sex before marriage. Like it's more than that. And majority of the time, if you stop there with that conversation, kids are so curious, they're going to go out and do it because all you kept telling them was no, instead of really educating them, explaining to them what a soul tie is and what God says about waiting for your partner.
Not only that, and then you just have the examples of all the people in the church that aren't happily married. And you're just like, well, why would I wait for that?
Right.
Yeah.
So.
I do a workshop on how to talk to kids about sex, and it's not a one-time thing. Like parents need, if parents don't talk to their kids about sex and all these issues, then their kids are going to find it from every other place.
Right.
So, and it's a conversation that happens over and over and over. I know one mom her son was saying, "Oh, I'm just going to kiss my girlfriend in the back of it, in the car," and the mom said, "Well, but that's going to make you want to have sex." "Oh, no, it's not going to make me want to have sex. I'm just kissing her. I'm not going to have sex." He had no idea that there was that penis kiss connection, right? And how, so yeah, just if our kids don't learn it from us, they're going to learn it from somewhere else.
Right.
And it's got to start from the beginning. In fact, Lucretia probably remembers my very first human sexuality class at Bethel, when she in her master's program. I write all the female and male genitals across the board, and I have all the students come up and put whatever street terminology they've ever heard for those. So, and that's basically to say, hey, look, we can't even talk about genitals by their proper names. Look at all these names that everybody refers to.
Right.
And it was to get the students to like start saying, okay, yes, let's say the word penis, let's say the word vagina,
Right.
and let's get comfortable and talk about it, because they're beautiful parts of our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I know we still have some time, but I'm going to roundtable this one, I guess. So a question was, what's one piece of advice that us as women can bestow upon men regarding sex and intimacy?
I would actually change that. I want women to know that the myth is that men want sex and women want intimacy. And women and men want intimacy. I cannot tell you how many men have come into my practice and they do not appreciate their wives just giving it up. They want to be loved. They are living in a world that tells them to suck it up, do not feel, suck it up, go out there, plow forward. The world is chewing them up, all of us, and spitting us out. Where is the one place that men can be held is in a loving relationship, held, nurtured, comforted, soothed, right there in her arms. A man wants intimacy as much as women, but men only get intimacy normally through the sex act. So I think women have to see it in a bigger perspective.
I like that.
And this is good.
Good.
Yeah, and that women maybe say, hey, honey, I know I love you. I want you to feel safe with me. That's what I would tell women to say. I want you to feel safe with me. I care about you.
Right.
I've got your back. I think the world of you. You're amazing. That's what I would suggest that women say to men.
I like that.
That was good.
Right? That was really good.
I'm not following that.
Right?
Cresheia?
I'm like, yeah. What came to mind, Walanda, when you posed the question is that, I mean, piggyback, on what Mary was saying is that let's talk. Let's have some conversation. You know what I mean? Like literally, let's lay things on the table. Like, ask what it is that I like. Be comfortable asking me what I like, and then give me permission to ask you what you like. And let's explore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not expecting you to know all things. How could you possibly know all things if you've never been intimate with that person? You know what I mean? What might have worked with the previous person doesn't mean it's going to work with me. So let's just give each other permission to ask what makes us feel good. What do we desire?
That's awesome. Another resource for everybody is on the phone app. There's a free app called Gottman, Gottman card decks. And there are lots of different card decks there, like about connection, about longings. There's salsa, mild, medium, hot. There's sex questions. So John Gottman found out that if a couple can talk about their sex life, which a lot of people can't, a lot of couples can't talk about their sex life.
Wow.
And they can't have eyes open sex either, looking into each other's eyes. So that's a little challenge for everyone as well. But if they can get these card decks, there are questions in here, answer them with each other, they're going to have better sex again, because they're able to talk about it, because the research shows if you can talk about your sex life is going to be better even still, besides the emotional connection you have.
Sure. If I remember, it's actually free. I think I've recommended it to a client before.
It is free. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, free resource.
Yeah.
Excellent.
One thing that I just want to share is, even through like my own personal experience, it's so important to get to know your person when it comes to like their love language, as well as like the different levels of intimacy. Because if your spouse or you just don't feel like having sex, And if you don't know that person's love language or the other types of intimacy that you guys connect with, then it can also stump your growth within the relationship. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, maybe you're tired, you don't want to have sex, but I also know your love language is whatever it is, I don't know, touch, or just for a body massage, right? Or if you know there's a different, another thing that he likes to do, if it isn't always just sex, then I think it really builds that relationship and the connection, because again, it doesn't always have to be about the sex.
Right. Very good. Yeah.
Walanda, any more?
So, I mean, I don't really know what the question means, but someone talked about using sex as a weapon and using sex as manipulation.
Yeah.
But I'm not really clear on the actual question. Or can sex as a weapon be defined?
Yeah. Sex is a weapon. People can use it. They can withdraw sex from their partner. Say, I'm not going to have sex with you, or you must have sex with me. But the opposite of loving someone isn't hating them, it's using them. And that puts that in the user category. Like, that's using. And that's a bad place for a couple to use sex as a weapon. Sex is love is to be given, it's to be received, and it's to be returned.
Wow, that's deep.
So that makes me think about BDSM and how that works in intimacy and sex. And I don't really know the question, but it just made me think about
Yeah, I mean, that's the kink, right? That some couples like, and they get pleasured by that and they feel loved by it. And other couples think, it's too masochistic and it's not good. And so there are some couples that enjoy it. I don't know. It just depends on how connected are they and how much do they love each other and what is their secure connection. And then is that a piece of their sexual life, or is that just, are they disconnected and they're just using each other? That would be a bad place.
And again, like we keep sharing with everyone, is like that communication, right? So if you are into foreplay and you're, depends on like what your pain tolerance, and if like yourself or your partner is more authoritative, or if they like to take control, and if they can make it into like a fun pleasure in the bedroom, like you said, and it's healthy, there's communication, there's a safe word, like you said, and if it's mutual, and that's the key thing, if it's mutual between two people, which is Lucretia?
Consenting.
Yes, if you're consenting, then I think it's safe, it could be fun, and it actually can make the bedroom like even more spicy in your relationship. But again, it's just all about the safe word. Both are agreeance of it. And like you said, Mary, no one's taking advantage of the other person by doing it if they don't want to.
Right.
I think the thing I'm walking away with the most is that whole attachment piece. And I know you did. I don't think you said it in that way, but I always remember it in that way. It's like, how attached and connected am I with my partner, or the person that I'm choosing to be intimate with? And that's kind of the foundation of the relationship, foundation of, the intimacy and the sex in the relationship is that's how important that is.
Yeah, and it is, we used to think it was just for children and their mom. And it is from the cradle to the grave.
Absolutely.
We need to know that someone has our back and we need to feel connected from the cradle to the grave. If children have safe connection with their parents, they feel secure, they go out and they soar. When they feel insecure with their parents, they get clingy, they stay home, they're not as productive. And it's from cradle to the grave. As we grow older, we need it as well. If there's a clip called Still Face Experiment with Susan Johnson, and She talks about it with Ed Tronick shows it with a mother and a baby, how the mother's face goes blank and the baby just gets very activated and upset. And then the same thing with a couple. You know, when you feel like your partner is not there, then you get
Panicked.
anxious, right? And it is a bad place because then that leaves you alone in a world that's going to chew you up and spit you out. And so it's a bad place when you love someone and you feel disconnected from them. So yes, read Sue Johnson's book called Love Sense. It'll explain all of it. If couples go about having this, 75% are cured, 90% at the very least get better, is the research.
Okay.
Heard of when almost 50% of couples are disconnecting and divorcing.
Oh.
So it's about children and their parents and adults and adults.
It's so good. That whole theory is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Bowlby was big in that. He was a psychologist, and he was the one that said in England, hey, when your child's in the hospital, let the parents come in and be with the child. I mean, I'm old enough to know I was in a sledding accident, and my mother wasn't home. A friend's mother took me to the hospital. They admitted me into the hospital at 8. My mother got there at 8 o'clock. The bell rang and all the parents left and the children stayed in the hospital. We stayed there, and then the parents weren't allowed to come back until the next morning, like at, I don't know, 10 o'clock maybe. And John Bowlby's like, hey, let's stop doing this. These kids will get healed faster and easier if they have their secure attachment right there with them. And now it's expanded to adults too.
Absolutely. I can imagine that happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except with COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it would not happen now, and it's not happening with adults either. Yeah.
Wow. It was very, very insightful.
Yes.
I mean,
So good, Mary.
I'm taking away several things, as well as things I want to look further into, you know, works and stuff. But again, it's, you know, it's like you kept saying, Merencia or Mary, it's open communication, I think, is important. And when couples come to speak to us or what have you, it's about helping them create their own narrative. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about what Hollywood says. It's not about what you maybe seen in pornography. It's literally about your individual relationship.
Right.
Knowing your body, what you desire, what you don't desire, and being able to effectively communicate it to your partner.
Yeah.
So really.
Right. Do you feel safe? Can you turn to your partner? Be vulnerable? Can you talk about sex to your partner? Isn't that interesting? People can have sex with each other, but they can't talk about it.
Right. And you even said that sometimes don't even turn the light on and don't even look each other in the eye.
Yeah.
That's pretty deep. That's pretty deep.
Well, I don't know about you ladies, but I would love to have you back on the show for a part 2. Wasn't enough time. That was so good. Thank you so much for, you know, just sharing all your knowledge and your experience with us in our personal life, as well as therapists, as we continue to help other individuals and couples. This was definitely a blessing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. So nice to be here. I would love to come back and maybe even bring some of my colleagues.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can bring my male colleague with, you know, one of my male colleagues.
Yes.
Merencia, you want to role play? You want to role play a?
I don't know about me.
Maybe some of the single therapy work, we role play all the time.
Right. Yeah, that'd be fun. Just to get a male's perspective, you know?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, again, we hope the listeners have taken some things away from this. There is a handout that we will have posted on, is it Facebook, Walanda?
Yes.
Yes, on Facebook. So please go check that out. Any questions you may have for Mary or what have you, you can also post them, you know, and get her information. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.